Okay, so we have just given starter the ability to adapt. We gave it an adaptive procedure where it makes the stimulus a little bit less bright every time the participant gets it correct, up to some dimmest level that will allow it to get, and it makes it brighter for every mistake that they make up to some maximum level of brightness. And so now it's adaptive, and the next step we're going to make starter rely on parameter files. So a parameter file is an external file, a text file, the way it's often done at least, where you can just change the parameters in the parameter file rather than changing them in the code itself and then recompiling your experiment. And very often in labs, this is a much more convenient way to do things because you sometimes need different parameters for different participants, or you may just want to change the parameters from one experiment to the next without changing anything else, but things like the stimulus size or its duration or its intensity or whatever it's going to be, whatever parameters you decide you want to make changeable in a file. And that way you don't have to come back and recompile every time. So that's what we're going to do. So what I have here is just a notepad open, and then I have the in my repos folder, in the folder for starter, I have that open so that you can see once I save it where we're going to put it. We're going to put it in the starter folder. Do not put it in the debug folder where the executable is. You have to put it in that one layer up. Okay. And so we're starting with just Notepad, and then here, back behind here you see in Visual Studio that I have the starter code up to the point where it is the adaptive procedure, which was the last thing we did. That's the code that's back here. All right, so we're going to make a parameter file, and to do that, it's just a text file. And the first thing we're going to do is specify the parameter name. And one of the parameters that we're going to make changeable with starter is the size. And we're going to start with a size of 20. Now, this size is stated in terms of pixels because that's what the Allegro draw filled circ or draw circ, any of those Allegro functions work in units of pixels. All right, and then let's change the whatever brightness we're going to start with. We're going to make that a parameter, and so we're just going to call it 100 for now. So currently, both of these things, the size and the beginning brightness, are hard-coded in the starter code back here. We're going to turn them into parameters so that we don't have to recompile every time we want to change these things. All right, and now I'm just going to save as, and I am going to save it in the starter, there it is, starter folder, and I am going to call it starter underscore parameters. It's a .txt file, and now you can see in my starter folder, there it is, I have the starter parameter file. Okay, so now I'm going to minimize that and get it out of the way, and let's get to the code itself. So in order to do this, for reasons that I discuss in the book, but I won't discuss here, we can't use that old C style of opening and closing files. So we're going to have to use some actual newer C++ stuff, and newer, it's like 30 years old now, but it's newer than C. All right, so we're going to have to, in order to use the C++ file input output stuff, we're going to have to include two other headers. Fstream, and oddly enough, Fstream and this next one, which is SStream, do not end in .h, and I don't know why that is, but it is. Okay, so that is Fstream and SStream, no .h at the end. Okay, and for the first time now in Starter, we are once again using namespace std. Okay. All right, it's also going to be handy for us to have another defined constant. So we are going to pound define the number of params. And right now we only had two, right? The size and the brightness. You can scale that up and add more parameters as you need to, but for this introductory video, we're just going to do two parameters. And the reason that we need this defined constant is because that's going to control our looping through the parameter file. Okay, so let's see, what now? Hang on one second. Okay, so we need to, here in main, we need to define or declare, declare our parameter file, and it is going to be an if stream, that is an input stream, and we'll call it, for purposes of our program, parameters, and then we need to tell if stream that it is the starter underscore parameters.txt file. All right, and you should be probably anticipating this by now. Whenever we open something with a command that looks like this, right, what else do we have to do? Right, we have to close it to avoid memory leaks. So we're going to scroll down here to the end of main. Here's my end of main, right here where I'm destroying the font, closing the log file that I created. I'm going to put in the function parameters close, open close paren, and of course, semicolon, and that will make sure that this parameters file gets closed when the program exits and doesn't cause any memory leaks. Okay, and now we're going to need a couple of new variables. One, the target intensity here, this is actually now going to be a parameter that we load, so we're going to get rid of that because we're no longer just declaring it as a variable. But we are, oh, I do need to keep it though. I'll just set it in just a second. But now I need a couple new ones. I need parameter array. I'll just call it param array. And it needs to be as big as, did I use, yeah, in the number of, what did I call that up there? Num params? Yeah, num params. There you go, with square brackets. All right, because it is another array, but it's going to be an array that's as big as the number of parameters that I've got. And then I also need a couple more index variables. So I have I here at the beginning of my declaration of the integers. I'll just add a j, and then I'm also that'll act as another index variable. And then I'm going to need another variable x. And j I want to initialize as 0. I think we'll see why in a second. Okay, and we now need we need to write the loop that's actually going to open the parameter file and read it in. And so we will do that. We'll do that right here, right after we open up we'll create our display, open our font, and all that kind of stuff. And this is going to be a while loop. While j, our integer, our counter is less than num params. We're going to do some stuff, and at the end of that, j++. Now it's a little bit tricky to use a while loop with that needs to run a particular number of times. That can get a little bit tricky, but we want it to be a while loop because if you go through and decide you want to add like 10 more parameters, well, it's just it's a little bit less troublesome with the while loop than it is with a for loop to do that. Okay, so now in here we're going to declare another integer x, and now we're going to use this thing called parameters ignore, because if you'll remember, let me reopen the parameter file just to look at it for a second. Got to track this down here. 1 second. Starter parameters. Now, you know, we put this name here, size, so that when we opened the parameter file as the human programmer or as the human user of this experiment in the lab, we know what this parameter is. It's the size. But our program doesn't need to know this. We're going to tell the program right now this thing that you're loading is the size. So we need to tell the program to ignore this word right here. And so that's what this command here does. Param ignore. And it's going to ignore up to numeric limits of stream size, and that's inside the greater than, less than brackets. And then we need 2 colons here, and max, and then a single quotes with a space in between them. And so what this is telling it is to ignore up to the numerical limits of the stream size up until it gets to a space. And of course, if you remember from the parameter file that I just closed again stupidly, that's exactly what comes right before the actual parameter, right? Is a space in between the name, which was size, and then space, and then the size, the number of the size that we wanted. So we're going to do that. And then, let's not forget our semicolon. And now we need to use the insertion operator and assign the value that it reads to that variable x. So now x, for example, given our parameter file, has the value of 20. And now we want to assign that to the param array, the jth param array, because that's the one we're on the jth time that we run through the loop, and just set that equal to x. Okay, and then j++, and now we need to move down a line, right? So we need another one of these ignores here. Instead of typing it, I'm just going to copy and paste it. Here I'll right click so you can see what I'm doing. Copy, paste, and that saves me having to just retype the whole thing. But now instead of a space, what I'm looking for is the return line character, which is the \n, and that tells us to return line. Okay, now that while loop is going to read through and assign to param array all the values that we have in our parameter file, but in order to use them in our program, we need them to belong to variables. So the target size is just param array 0, and why 0 instead of 1? Remember that C++, and like C, is a zero-based counting language, so it starts counting from 0, not from 1. Okay, and then target intensity, of course, is just then param array 1. And then if you add more parameters, you just have to add additional lines where you set whatever variables you want in your code here equal to the next value for param array. We only have 2 values in it for now, but if you added more, you just add more lines right here where you did all your assignments for those 2 variables. All right, let me make sure that I got those target underscore intensity. Yep. And target size. Where did I ever have target size? I need a target size. Yes, I remember. Target size. See, this is what happens when it's a few days between recording videos and working on this book. I forget what in the world I was doing. But remember, target size, there's target size. It is a value, or it's a variable in trial right now. But we don't want that because now we're bringing it in from a parameter file. So I'm going to get rid of it as a declared int in trial. And instead, we're going to bring it in. We're going to pass it from main to trial because we have to bring it into main because it's coming in from the parameter file. Of course, we could use a trial instead to open the parameter file, but then we would have to open the parameter file, read in the parameters, and close the parameter file every single time we had a trial, and that's super inconvenient. So let's not do that, and it could slow down and muck up our timing and stuff. So we're not going to do that. Instead, we're just going to bring that up here in the function declaration for trial. Don't forget we have to, in that case, also come up here to our function prototype and do it up here as well. Okay. And that means here in main, I do need to declare it up here. Here, I'll just put it right after target intensity. It is still an int. And it means that when I call the trial function right here, I need to pass it not only the target intensity, but the target size as well. Of course, I need to do that for both red and green trials. Okay, and now I think we should be pretty ready to go with that. All right, so we're going to give it a try now and see if I have any errors here. If we do, I'm going to pause them so that I don't have to delete this entire video. Let's see if it'll code here. Nope. Let's see, what's the problem here? Target intensity undeclared identifier. All right, let me hunt this down. Right, because I put it right here. You probably saw me when I did this. As you're watching this video, you probably saw me make that mistake and were like, no, don't do that. Remember, target intensity has an underscore. Target size, I didn't put a, I don't know why. I didn't put an underscore in between target and size, but I did between target and intensity. All right, let's see if that compiles. Yep. All right, there we go. So it's running. Nice. All right, let me just run through this. I haven't shown you yet in this video series how to put escape in as an escape clause so that you can just press the escape button and get out of what you're doing. So we're going to have to run through all 10 trials here real quick. We'll say, there we go, we're done. Okay, so now you just saw what that looked like, right? So now let's test out the parameter file. Let's open this up and let's change the size. Let's change it. Let's make it really extreme, 200. And let's change that initial brightness. Let's also make that 200. So now this should be really visually obvious. Now don't forget you have to save that. And always close your parameter file, because if your program tries to open this parameter file while Notepad has it open, it's going to crash your program. Well, your program just won't appear to run, and you'll wonder why. Why is my program not running? It was running fine, and it'll be, and I know this because I've made this mistake probably about 7 million times at this point. It'll be because you have your parameter file open, otherwise open. Okay, so we've made the change, we've saved it, and let's see how different that looks. That didn't look different at all. All right, well, we'll have to figure out what that's about. So why didn't that change? Because I still had parameters open. Another parameter file. Where is this one from? I don't even know. Let's change that one. I think I know what the problem is here. I forgot here in trial. Remember, in trial we set the target size. Yep, right there. Forgot to get rid of that. Okay. Now I think it's going to work a little bit better. What do you guys think? Yeah, that's just a little bit more obvious. All right, and you saw that brightness, hopefully. It started off much brighter than it had been. Oops. Okay, and now let's just change it one more time so that we can convince ourselves that this is actually working now. Oop. Whoa, what happened here? I don't know what happened here. Oh, I'm in the debug. That's the wrong one. That's what happened there. Okay. Let's try this again. Starter parameters. There we go. All right. Let's try this. We're going to go down to a size of 5. And let's start at a brightness of just 50 and see what happens. Okay. Save. Run it one more time. Oh yeah, you see how tiny that is? Oh, there we go. But you can barely see it. Especially when it gets dark, you can barely see it. All right, so you can see how that might be useful for measuring sensitivity of some kind or another. Yep. Okay. I'm going to end it here. This is a little over 20 minutes now, so I think that's good. You now have the know-how to use a parameter file instead of hard coding all of the characteristics of your stimuli and other, whatever, however you want to control the program. Really, any sort of anything that could be a variable in the program can be loaded as a parameter from a parameter file. So any way in which you want to change your program without recompiling, you can now do that. Oh no, there's one other thing that I need to talk to you about though before we go. I almost forgot this, which is when you do use a parameter file, this is just good practice, you always need to then record the values of the parameters that you used in your log file, because when you use a parameter file, you open yourself up to the danger that you will run subjects and then decide to change the parameters. You do that, and then you run some more subjects, and then you have data where you're not certain what parameters were used on that run. And so to avoid that kind of problem, I mean, you could kind of avoid that problem by keeping external notes and just very carefully noting for every participant that you run, that you collect data from, what parameters were used, but that's a pain in the neck, right? Why not just record it in their log file? So that's exactly what we're going to do. All right, so in the log file here, we are going to add, let's see, right after, let's see, where are we going to put it? Target color. Right here. We're going to put target size, so we know what size was used, and then again we need the backspace T for the tab before the response, and target brightness, and again the \T. And so we need to add two integers in here. So we're going to add them. It's going to be a %i \T, and then let's see, I seem to recall, no, I think this should be fine. Okay, just add one more, %i \T. I seem to recall when I was working all this out, some problem I had with the fact that one of these is actually a float, and that caused a problem. Oh, maybe it was because I had added it at the back here. Maybe that's what had caused the problem, because remember from way back when, of course, the trial RT that we're recording, that's a float. And so if you misalign this thing right here that tells it it's a float, that's actually a double, excuse me, that's a double. If you misalign the thing that tells it what kind of variable goes in that slot, if you put, like if you say this is a double, but then in that slot here in this list you put an int, it's not going to record correctly. So, but it will not give you an error. It'll just give you garbage in your log file. So you want to be very careful about that. But pretty sure we're adding these two ints in a long string of ints. All right, so how did it go? Right after the trial, that's I. Target color, that was the trial stimulus. And then target size right here. And that is I. Oh no, sorry, just target size. No I there. It's always the same. Target size. But then, at least that'll give you the starting target size. Of course, the adaptive procedure then changes it. But now then you would know what you started with. And then trial intensity. I. Okay, so we're recording the beginning target size and then the target intensity for each trial. And now that's going to get recorded in your log file. Okay, so that is the end of this video. Now we're at almost half an hour. Goodness gracious. Okay, I will see you guys in the next one.